I played Persona 3 roughly half a year after Persona 4. I downed it in a month, like Ken downing a gallon of milk, and I barely had time to think about it in the context of Persona as a whole. But while doing research for Arcana analysis, I realized that thinking about Persona 4, and Persona 5 for that matter, as events that happened after 3 recontextualized the entire narrative for me. I started to wonder if those few, annoying fans were correct in calling my beloved little Inaba adventure a carbon copy of 3. But I soon came to realize that it's really not like that. The two are similar, and they follow highly reminiscent outlines. But what I've come to understand is, those outlines are just bones. Peel away my flesh, and I'll have the same basic bone structure as any other person, but with every layer of muscle and tendon you add, the person becomes slightly different, until you get to the outer layer, the presentation, and you find a completely different human being. Persona 3 and 4 are two games within the same series with similar mechanics and storylines that achieve very different ends. Persona 4 left me absolutely sobbing as I watched Narukami leave his friends. Then, it ultimately filled me with hope when I viewed the epilogue. Meanwhile, Persona 3 made me shed only a few quiet tears in its final moments, but left me with a long, aching wound in my heart that prevented me from listening to Kimi no Kyoku without bursting into tears for a solid month and a half. And the way that these two parallel games achieved these very different emotional ends was through their presentation and thematic cores. Persona 3 and 4 use strong, prevailing ideas and feelings to differentiate themselves, and this separation runs so deep that it can be boiled down to its essence through examination of the myths that the two games are based around. Persona 3 tackles layered issues that involve the deep, dark questions of life and the continued existence of everyone, whereas Persona 4 handles the invisible shared struggles that every human goes through individually. The presentation of these themes is then supplemented through the use of the legends of Orpheus and Izanagi, the starting personas of the protagonist characters. Despite being divided by hundreds of miles and very different cultures, the two myths parallel each other in many ways. Both the tale of Orpheus and the tale of Izanagi follow the titular hero's descent into the lands of the dead in an attempt to retrieve their deceased wives. Both seem to come close to succeeding, only for the devil to be in the details and fail at the last minute. Once again, we have similar bone structures, but upon closer examination, each carries a different meaning and tone. To give us a digestible starting block and a point of reference, the core of Persona 3 and Orpheus's myth will be referred to as life, and the core of Persona 4 and Izanagi's myth, truth. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, Sam. Wouldn't death or mortality be a better summary word for Persona 3? And if you verbalize those thoughts, I'd politely tell you that I think you're only half right. But we'll get to that later. For now, we're going to dive into Persona 4, as it's a much easier work to sink one's teeth into. Persona 4 is a story about people finding and facing themselves. It's about the duality of human nature and how damn complicated people are. But it's also a celebration of the quest for self-understanding, and every human being's capacity not only to have flaws, but to rise to the challenge and face them. It's a game that wants us all to recognize that we're only human, and really, that's okay. Being human means we can always try to be better. We have the free will to change ourselves. This is achieved by its in-depth look at each of the main characters. Their psyches are turned into dungeons, which the main character and their team navigate on a series of dynamic, time-bound rescue missions. Take too long, and your target will be completely consumed by the parts of themselves they've repressed. And I think there's really something in this approach. These people are asked to face their inner truths one-on-one. If left to their own devices, they'll crack under the pressure and end up a corpse on a telephone pole. But with the intervention and help of the investigation team, aka their friends, each victim faces their feelings and accepts them. Through this acceptance of the truth, they're awarded the ability to fight on and help others. Now we finally come back to the god Izanagi. In brief, Izanagi was a major player in Japanese mythology, as father to the nation's islands and many of its deities. When his wife, Izanami, died giving birth to a fire god, he decided to visit her in Yomi, the Japanese underworld, in hopes of bringing her back. Izanami likes this idea, and while she prepares to leave, she asks Izanagi not to light any fires to increase his visibility in the unending darkness before him. However, the god does so, and he views Izanami in a decrepit, terrifying state. In truth, Izanami had already eaten from the hearth of Yomi, and could never return to the land of the living. Izanagi books it out of there, leaving the rightfully pissed Izanami behind him. Izanagi and Izanami play big roles in Persona 4. as does the concept of terrible truths that must be accepted. Upbeat songs like Reach Out to the Truth and big shining orbs that grant godlike power kind of give truth in Persona 4 this divine, enjoyable vibe. But in reality, the truths that the investigation team face are all unpleasant and hard to swallow. These are truths about rotten parts of themselves, easy answers being fake, and a family friend being a serial killer. Like the truth that Izanagi had to accept, they're not fun at all. They kind of suck. But Persona 4 champions the idea that it's better not to live in ignorant bliss. We have to face painful and unsettling truths. Time and again, the denial of the truth is shown as a highly negative thing in Persona 4. Denial is what turns a vindictive shadow into a full-blown monster. Denial is what turns you into a murderer and kills your little cousin. Denial is what causes someone to nearly erase themselves from existence. Persona 4 tells us that denial is the easy way out. It's a means of creating a world where you are comfortable and you don't have to be challenged. A unique, false sense of reality can be created by simply avoiding the truth or having your sense of it diluted. This idea is well presented by the underlying theme of digital communications, a complementary idea that manages to subtly present itself in the foreground of the entire game. As we progress into a digital era where television and internet have weaved their way seamlessly into our lives, it becomes way too easy for our perception of reality to be distorted. Despite the convenience and undeniable vitality new technology holds to modern society, they have a uniquely dangerous ability to spread misinformation. With news broadcasts as their false prophets and tabloid writers their sages, Izanami sees humanity as a lost cause worthy of destruction, no doubt in part due to a deep-seated bitterness at what she likely saw as a betrayal by her husband. In her eyes, the human race is much like Izanagi, running from the truth, figuratively rather than literally in their case. However, Izanagi's flight didn't necessarily denote denial of what he observed in Yomi. Rather, it was an acceptance of the futility of his quest. Had Izanagi not been able to stomach the truth, he likely would have taken reckless and widely harmful actions in an attempt to bring his wife back. Leaving someone you love in the land of the dead, when they're so close to freedom, would be tremendously challenging, even if they didn't look quite as appealing as they used to. Yu Narukami acts as a metaphorical vessel for Izanagi. His actions are in line with the same will as the god, wishing to preserve humanity despite Izanagi's onslaught and dire determination. His quest for the truth and rejection of denial makes him a perfect fit for his persona, and a worthy protagonist for a journey that focuses so heavily on veracity and self-recognition. The way that Yu takes on the spiritual role of Izanagi throughout Persona 4 anchors the underlying theme and weaves in the game's mythological basis, much like the similar roles Minato takes on in Persona 3. Earlier I asserted that saying Persona 3 is a game about death and mortality is only half right, and that calling it a game about life is the correct answer. I stand by that, because I don't think a game centering only on death could do what Persona 3 does. The idea of life encompasses the other proposed themes as well. Life isn't simply the act of existing as an organic being filled with energy. It's a cycle that comes from and ends with death. Death is final, but it's only a tiny fraction of the entire circle we can see life as. This is a circle that is in turn fed by death as well. It cannot exist without it. Life and death are eternally, intrinsically linked, one able to hold any meaning or ability without the other. Persona 3 could not effectively tell the story and convey the message it does if it didn't acknowledge and utilize this idea. A game that focuses only on death would run itself into the ground rather quickly. Even as an inevitable facet of life, it's a depressing subject. A laser-guided focus on it would only exhaust a player and drive them into despair. But Sam, you might say, death is omnipresent in Persona 3. Hell, the game's tagline is Memento Mori. To that I say, you're correct. But you really can't say that death is the only thing present in the game. You see, it's all about Aigis. What it is that humanizes Aigis and really brings her to life are her interactions with Cease and the protagonist. While her original goal is to destroy shadows, it slowly morphs to become destroying shadows for the sake of protecting humans. Specifically, the people she loves, her friends. The lifeblood of the Persona series is the idea that strength is found through bonds, and that the power of human connection can surpass even divine forces. The world can only be obtained when it is realized that the most precious things in the universe are the bonds that you form and the time you spend with the people you love. Thus, any sacrifice or undertaking is only a small price to pay should it be for love, a theme that we see mirrored beautifully in the tale of Orpheus. As many know, Orpheus was a supernaturally gifted musician. After the death of his wife, Eurydice, his melancholic tones so moved Hades that he was allowed passage into the underworld to bring back his beloved. However, this came with a caveat. Should he look back at Eurydice before reaching the mortal world, she would disappear and be gone forever. The imperfections of humanity overtook Orpheus, and he prematurely snuck a glance at his late wife, ending his quest. The musician was once again thrown into despair, and ultimately met his demise in one of two ways depending on the story, either by the hands of the Maenads or by suicide. There are multiple parallels between Persona 3 and Orpheus's journey, in both plot and theme. On a surface level, both involve a young man delving into the pits of Tartarus and ending up dead as a result. However, the most important parallels are more abstract, and, much like in Persona, center around human connection. Both Orpheus and Minato undertake their burdensome tasks out of love. In Orpheus's case, it's a romantic love towards Eurydice, whereas in Minato's case, it is a platonic and agapic love for the people he is connected with over the year in-game. Both willingly sacrifice themselves for the people they love, though Minato succeeds where Orpheus fails. It should also be noted that post-death, both Orpheus and Minato bear some sort of spiritual power. After being torn apart by the Maenads, Orpheus's still singing head floated downstream and was eventually recovered in Lesbos, buried, and had a shrine built on top of it, where an oracle of the Orphic mystery cult would prophesize. Minato's body, in turn, becomes the seal that keeps Erebus from reaching Nyx and once again sending her to destroy the world. Much like Orpheus, Minato doesn't end with his death. His mortal life was given to seal Nyx, but due to his attainment of the world, he still exists in a spiritual form. Minato's ultimate sacrifice at the end of Persona 3 makes the game much more tragic than Persona 4, a contrast that rings true in the myths of Orpheus and Izanagi as well. Orpheus's story is a tragedy from the beginning, and it never changes. Izanagi's legend, however, maintains a fairly neutral tone throughout. The second loss of Eurydice is seen as a great failing of Orpheus's, but Izanagi having to leave Izanami and Yomi is simply a fact. The two myths are hardly addressed or allusioned outside of the protagonist's initial personas, despite guiding the game's plots in such major ways. This works to the game's advantage, though. It allows the lore to be seamlessly integrated without being overbearing, and gives the stories a feeling of internal consistency and thematic sensibility. Persona 3 and 4 use ancient and famous legends to subconsciously inform its players by inserting them into the background of the games. This creates a chain. As we take on the roles of Minato and Yu, they in turn take on the roles of Orpheus and Izanagi. With this guidance, we know the type of heroes we're supposed to be, and the feelings of the stories that we inhabit. The subtle weaving of mythology and plot helps to give each story a strong and distinct core that sets them clearly apart from one another, and lets them resonate with emotions as different as yellow and blue. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this examination of some of the mythology behind the Persona series. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and look at some more content from the AVG Club, and don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. See ya!